Well, I think I'd certainly be remiss if I did not include a 3D text effect in this course. With the new features of 3D and Photoshop CS5 Extended, I just felt I had to include this in here. And again, yes, it is only in Photoshop CS5 Extended, the 3D features, but this is very, very cool stuff. If you don't have Extended, watch this anyway. It might be enough to get you to want to get the Extended version, because these new 3D features are very, very cool. So this is just going to be a quick little 3D text effect and being able to apply textures to it. So here I have an image of this really cool kind of grungy looking texture that I want to use. Well, first thing is I'm going to go ahead and make a duplicate of that background element. And then go ahead and put this into a 3D postcard. And the reason why I want to do this is that I want to be able to sample this as a texture in 3D. So it puts it in a 3D postcard. You can see it's a 3D layer in the Layers panel. I'm going to go ahead and open up the 3D panel here. And yes, I am kind of jumping around the 3D. This isn't really a 3D course. I do have a full course on mastering 3D here on Kelby Training, but I'm just kind of going through this specific type of effect here. So I've created the 3D postcard in here. I'm going to go into the materials section right here, and you can see, and just so we can be sure, I'm going to go in here and choose the 3D Select Material tool and just click on this material right here. And when it's selected, you can see it shows up inside of this little tiny icon here. Well, if I go and click on that and choose New Material, it will, we'll just call it Grunge. It will save it as a 3D material I can apply to another 3D object. So if it shows up, there it is at the bottom of the menu there. So I no longer need this postcard layer. I'm going to go ahead and throw that away, and now I'm left with my original layer. Well, I'm going to go ahead and remove the color information from this because I did want it in the texture, but I don't want it as a background piece. So I'm going to go ahead and press Shift-Command-U, and that's going to desaturate that background. Then I'm going to create another layer above it and simply give this a base gray fill. So I'm going to press Shift-Delete. Again, we're on the new blank layer, fill it with gray, and there we are. Now I'm going to jump over to my Paths panel, and I have a path set here. And it's a very stylish, it's the word Asylum in this very cool font that I found on dafont.com. And I'm going to load, I'm actually not loading as a selection, I'm just selecting the entire path that contains all of the text, and then making sure we're on that layer that contains the gray fill. Then we're going to go to the 3D menu, go down here to Repoussé, and choose Selected Path. And that's going to form 3D text based on that path and that gray fill. And there we have it. So notice it's applied a default extrusion. Right here in the extrude section, we can set that to a smaller amount. I'm actually going to highlight the depth and set that to, let's do 0.3. We can go a little deeper than that. We'll do 0.4. So you can want to see it in 3D. You can actually just click inside and move it around in 3D space like that. Notice what I'm doing is just clicking and dragging left to right with the rotation tool, this top rotation tool at the top of the window. And we've got cool 3D text. How awesome is that? And how quick was that? We did that very, very quickly. Now I'm going to add another element to the text. Over here is the beveling. So I'm going to set the bevel and the width to 1, height and width, so it gives me a little bit of an edge on that text. And let's actually go ahead and slide it forward here so we can see a little bit better. Now I want to apply a texture to it. You remember that texture we created a moment ago? It's up here in the materials section, and I can apply it to individual parts of my text, be it the front, the back, the bevel areas, or the sides, which are the extrusions right here, or the entire thing. In this case, I want to do the entire text. So I'm going to go in here and select that texture, and boom, it applies it to my elements. Look how cool that is. Oh, that is so awesome. Right here inside Photoshop, you would have had to go outside another application and bring in 3D text to do what we just did in just a matter of minutes right here inside Photoshop. Now, remember we applied that beveling? To define that edge of that beveling, it's a little bit more. You can change the color of it. In here, I'm going to actually go into that front bevel, and let's choose this white color here. And you can see it defines those edges a little bit better. Doesn't have to be white. You can make it a dark color like black. And there it gives you a little bit. Actually, that looks a little bit better. I think I'm going to go ahead and leave it to that. So other different settings you've got. You got the extrusions and bevels. You can do all this to text and even shapes. And it's just all there. It's very, very cool new feature. So we'll put this back, and I'm just going to clip the home position and put it back in place, and then go ahead and click OK here. And there we have our 3D text. That's pretty much it. But now you can go in here and play with the various tools. We've got the 3D object tools. We can slide it towards us here. You can open up your 3D panel and go over here into the lights section, and it's got some default lights already applied to it. But if we go in here and add a new spotlight, if I go into the new menu down here at the bottom of the 3D panel and choose New Spotlight, it's going to add a light in there. Now, it's hard to see the lights, so you need this little convenient little feature down here at the bottom with the icon. Click on that and turn on 3D light, and it shows you the wireframe. Then you simply go in here and grab your 3D light tools. They're grouped in here inside of the 3D panel with the little light bulb icon. Make sure you're using the right tool, and just use these tools to move the lights around in 3D space. And I'm not going to lie to you, it takes a little bit of practice. If you're not familiar with 3D, it is going to take some getting used to. If I push it, I'm actually pulling it back towards me. And let's actually slide it down and then point it up so it's kind of pointing up from the bottom on that text. There we go. And that's looking pretty good. So the wireframes are a huge, big help in positioning the lights. I'm going to turn that off for the moment. But I can also use the other manipulation tools. Here is the object rotation tool, same one that was in the menu, but I can click here and just rotate this text around and get a very different view altogether. But look at that. We're getting really cool, very realistic text. Now, there are lights and everything's happening, and there are shadows that are being generated here, but we can't see them yet, and that's because of the render mode. You simply go into your first tab of your 3D panel, and then go into render settings here and choose, actually no, it's not the render settings, they moved it. It's actually here in the quality settings. You're going to go down here and choose Ray Traced Draft. And what that's going to do is render any shadows or reflections you might have applied. Notice how it's casting shadows here based on the positioning of the lights we created, and it's really sharpening that up. So it looks really, really nice. So able to add other elements just as quick to a 3D object that you build right here inside Photoshop. In fact, let's say I like the front texture of that text, but maybe not the sides. Let's actually go back into the mesh section here and go down here to the very bottom and click on this little R button right here, and that will reopen the Repoussé panel so you can make further changes. And let's actually change the side color to something like a different texture altogether. There we go. So that's a bit of a noisy texture, but it's got kind of cool qualities about it. So you get an idea of the different things you can do, the different type of textures you can play around with, and defining textures like we did at the very beginning to be able to apply to certain types of text elements here completely inside Photoshop. Now, one last thing, because it's a Photoshop element, it's a Photoshop layer, we can go in here and add something like an adjustment layer. If I double click on it, I can add an outer glow. Set that really big and maybe change the blend mode to overlay. Really enhancing the look of it there. And I can just go back under the 3D, resume progressive render. And it's giving me that much more realistic 3D text. So, again, it is these features are only in the extended version of Photoshop, especially with the Repoussé. That is only a CS5 extended feature, but an important one, and great news for designers. If you're a Photoshop designer and you've been wanting to employ 3D into your design work, you now have that ability with these new 3D features, now standard in Photoshop Extended.